I'm so excited to have my friend Tom Skilling coming up. Let me just give you a little quick thumbnail sketch. He is the WGN Chief Meteorologist Emeritus. He appeared on WGN Evening News, WGN News at 9, WGN News at 10. He basically was just all over WGN. He celebrated his 45th anniversary with GN back in August of 2023 and retired from WGN TV at the end of February of last year. He started a successful career at the unheard age of 14. He doesn't even look that old. Down in Aurora, Illinois, while attending West Aurora High School. For the next 38 years, he hosted tornado and severe weather warnings at Fermilab seminars. This guy has done it all. And I've always enjoyed my time with him. So before I bring him up, I want to drop this real quick Earth Matters with Bill Curtis.
He might just be the most trusted weatherman in the business. Millions rely on his predictions, and he has a lot to say about climate change. As the chief meteorologist for WGN in Chicago and across America for the past 37 years, Tom Skilling has been studying weather patterns. And when it comes to climate change, he says our planet is on a record-shattering streak. Atmospheric concentrations of carbon dioxide are now over 400 parts per million. This is the first time in more than 800,000 years that there has been this much carbon in the atmosphere. When baseball got out of whack, congressional hearings led to modifications to America's national pastime. However, it's become apparent that Congress is not inclined to act on stemming the pollution that leads to the extreme weather-causing climate change that we're experiencing. If we trust him for the everyday weather, maybe we should pay close attention to his long-term forecast as well. I'm Bill Curtis for Earth Matters.
And with that, my friend Tom Skilling. Tommy, welcome to the show.
John, it's great to talk to you. You know, the work that you and Bill have done in this arena has been just amazing, and it's flattering as heck to be included in your effort. John, it's always fun to talk to you. I know we've talked on this subject many times,
yep,
and it continues to be a big issue. And
it sure does.
Now we've added to it. We've added to it now these budget cuts to our operational National Weather Service activities that are concerning, especially as we head into tornado season here. So lots to talk about today, yep, John. I look forward to talking with you about it.
So, Tom, two things. You know why they call a phone an Amici?
No. Please tell me.
So I believe Don Amici, the great actor, played Alexander Graham Bell. And that's where that comes from.
Right.
So I guess I'm the only guy in America knows why they call it Amici. And the second thing is, I had to tell you, the last time I think you were on the radio with me in this format, I was at another radio station. I was filling in for the great Gary Meyer. And when Gary was on from 4 to 7 o'clock, an afternoon drive, all he had to do was say, where's your, welcome to the show, and the phone lines would light up. And the reason I realized the phone lines were lighting up is because you were on a couple times during that slot, and you would talk about weather and things like that, but people wanted to call you and find out what the weather was like in French Lick, Indiana or something. And I was just fascinated with people's fascination, A, about the weather, and B, about the guy that delivers it. So, it's amazing to me, this trust that you have with people, especially here in the Midwest, is unbreakable. Trust that you have. And just as that Earth Matters alluded to, if we trust this guy with the weather, and millions do, then we kind of need to listen to what you're saying about climate change. So in the interim, can you explain the difference, Tom, between weather, which is what most of us experience, and climate, which is different?
Yeah, well, the weather is the instantaneous phase of the atmosphere. Climate is the weather averaged over decades and centuries. So, that's why, John, when we have a cold wave and people say, hey, what happened to global warming? That's the wrong approach. One cold wave or a heat wave, for that matter, does not a climate trend make. You have to look over a period of time and see what the trend is, which is what we've done. And there's no question, John, it's just irrefutable. The planet is warming. Not only is our atmosphere warming, but so is the ocean. And look, all weather on Earth is the result of one area gets warmer than another. We call that differential heating in the meteorological profession. And if you start fiddling with how we're warming this planet, which is what happens when you put into the atmosphere heat-retaining and re-radiating gases, these so-called greenhouse gases, methane, carbon dioxide, water vapor is a greenhouse gas. It's the reason this planet is livable, because it holds on to heat, and we're not as cold as in outer space, which would have prohibited life development as we know it on this planet.
Right.
So, we're the carbon. It's interesting, John. a fellow who was a Northwestern University of Illinois alum put a sensor on top of Mauna Loa, a volcano out in the Hawaiian Islands. This was Charles Keating, Dr. Charles Keating. Keeling, and he worked for Scripps Institute of Oceanography. He put that sensor up there in the 1950s, and ever since then, we've been getting a read out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean of the carbon dioxide levels. It's the longest-running instrument record of carbon dioxide levels, and of course, it's been up, and away. We've reached new levels on carbon dioxide. But then, the paleoclimatologists, these are the folks that use proxy indicators, everything from tree rings to bubbles of gas in ice and so forth. They can go back and take these tiny bubbles of ice that were trapped there from the early atmosphere. This goes back hundreds of thousands of years, and they can tell us pretty much what the atmosphere was composed of and what our greenhouse gas concentration was then. So we've got a pretty good running record of carbon dioxide levels in the planet going back hundreds of thousands, even a couple million years, and the trend has been for this to increase. This carbon dioxide, a heat-retaining, heat-radiating gas. And so what's happening is when you start changing the heating of the planet, the jet streams realign. The jet streams carry a lot of our storms. The planet, when the air is warm, holds more water. Every degree Celsius that the atmosphere warms means the atmosphere holds 4% more water. And we see very real indications of that in that, our hurricanes, for instance, have gotten much wetter than they were. And, there's been an upward trend in precipitation across Illinois. But there are also periods on the other end of the spectrum of drought. So, extreme weather, that's the calling card of climate change, and that's what's going on. And, of course, we saw what happened in Los Angeles most recently with those wildfires out there. And the word is just in today, John, that February was the third warmest month, February, on the books around here, going back more than 100 years, back into the 1800s, across the planet. So, there are continued signs we're getting warmer.
So, Tom, I hear from people quite often, and you're the perfect guy to ask because you'll have the right answer. I kind of know what the answer is, but I want to hear it from you, that there's been these about 5 or 6 major climate shifts in the history of this planet, which is roughly 4.5 billion years old. And people that are somewhat climate change deniers or global warming deniers, they'll say, well, these have all happened before. This is inevitable. This is just the way it's got to go. To that, you say what?
Well, it's interesting. Along that line, John, people said, hey, what about the ice age? What did the dinosaurs start flatulating or something? What caused it? Look, there are a lot of things going on that create climate. Among them are the gases in the atmosphere. But also, our planet does not revolve around the sun or orbit the sun in the same shape. Turns out there are Milankovitch cycles. This was named after an Eastern European astronomer who noticed that the shape of Earth's orbit around the sun changes. Right. And the periodicity of those changes, the cyclicality of it, is on the order of tens of thousands of years. At the same time, we're wobbling on Earth's axis. Our axis relative to the plane of the sun changes from 21.5 degrees to as much as 25.5 degrees. In other words, we're tilting, and the reason that's significant and the change of our orbit around the sun is significant is because it exposes different parts of the planet to different amounts of sunlight in different eras. And the change usually occurs over tens of thousands of years, the astronomically driven changes, and it seems like they played a major role in the Earth's major ice ages. Now, there have been other things like that, like the asteroid that hit down in the Gulf of Mexico near the Yucatan. That thing 60 million years ago threw up so much debris in the atmosphere that we had kind of a nuclear winter. In fact, that's where that term comes from. Afterwards, and the planet cooled dramatically. So you can have events like that affect climate.
So Tom, hold on with that 1 second. I got to run and take a short break. We're going to come back and drill even deeper with that. And the one thing I've never understood is why don't they call hemorrhoids asteroids? I've never, Lady B, I've never. No? Okay. We'll take a quick time out. Back with more right here on WCPT. Tom Skilling is joining me. We're talking about climate change and all those type of things. And Tom, one of the things that I mentioned about these other ice ages that happen, these global warming trends and stuff like that, you're explaining these natural ways that it's taken place, but am I correct, at least a little bit or not? Let me know. That this human-induced climate change is what's rapidly picking things up. This is not a natural occurrence.
No, that's the big change. You know, people will come at you and say, hey, we've always had climate change on this planet, and we have. There's no question. What sets what's going on now apart from those natural climate changes, like the orbital-induced climate changes and the wobbling on our axis, is the speed with which it's happening. By some accounts, John, these changes are occurring at 10 times the speed of any that we've observed over the term of humans walking this planet. You know, think about it. This planet is 4.5 billion years old. Humans have been around in roughly the kind of condition we're in now for about 300,000 years.
Right. And
civilization's been around a lot shorter than that. The most recent ice age we have melted about 10,000 years ago is the general consensus. There have been others before that, before we even, or any creatures like us, walked the planet. So 10 times faster is how much faster this is occurring right now. And you know, it's interesting. We did a series on climate change. I went up to Alaska. I've been traveling up there since 1980. The changes in the ice up there are just stunning. The Arctic regions on the planet are warming 3 to 4 times faster than we are here in the mid-latitudes, and you really see it. But I was talking to a climatologist up there, Dr. Brian Brettschneider, and he was saying, you know, I've lived up here 25 years. I have a teenage daughter. He said, it's happening so fast up here, climate change, that my teenage daughter talks about the changes she's seen in her life in, for instance, the extent of the ice, you know, the icebergs and so forth, and the glaciers. And he said, you know, that's amazing. It used to take a couple of generations before you saw these changes. And, you know, one of the things, too, John, that's a problem with climate change and difficult for some folks to get their hands around is the fact you don't see evidence of it directly out the backyard window every single day. These occur mainly as these extreme weather events. And, boy, we're seeing those. I mean, you know, these hurricanes are amazing. There were 4 hurricane landfalls in Florida last year. One of them 2 years ago, Ian, was the second most expensive hurricane to occur in U.S. history, topped only by Hurricane Katrina. To this day, the insurance industry is reeling down there. They're still cleaning up after that one that hit southwest Florida and then tracked across the state. Florida homeowners are paying 4 to 5 times the flood insurance premiums they were if they can get insurance at all. And, of course, the insurance companies have pulled out of California, Los Angeles, after these wildfires. This is what's starting to happen. We're starting to see economic effects from these extreme weather events because these insurance companies that, along with the American taxpayer, have to pick up the bill on these things, are realizing it's not a good business model to be insuring all of these extreme weather, the cleanups after all these extreme weather disasters. So they're pulling out of the field.
You know, Tom, I say this every time I get a chance, not only on my podcast, but also on live radio, that I learned a lot about what I think is important when it comes to our relationship to the environment in 5th grade in science class. Like, we live in a giant biosphere. Everything stays inside the sphere. This stuff just doesn't go somewhere. I mean, we know about the Montreal Protocol, how all the nations signed that because the chlorofluorocarbons were eating away at the ozone layer, which is the protective layer of the planet. And just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not there. So when
no, absolutely.
Right.
John, you know something else? This stratospheric ozone layer that was being worked away at by the chlorofluorocarbon propellants that you were talking about in aerosol cans before we banned them. You know, if you took the whole ozone layer up above the troposphere, the layer we live in, and brought it down here to ground level and exposed it to the pressure we live in down here on Earth's surface, the entire ozone layer would only be 2 centimeters thick.
Oh, come on.
That's less. Yeah, that's less than an inch thick. And one of those molecules of chlorofluorocarbon take out 100,000 molecules of ozone. It's a very unstable gas. Wants to define,
So, Tom, you're saying about an inch or so is keeping us alive?
Yeah. And, of course, when you get up into the thin upper reaches of the atmosphere, that's spread out over tens of thousands of feet.
Yeah.
But, of course, the air pressure up there, think about it. We're through half the mass of our atmosphere at about 18,000 feet. You go up to 10,000 feet, you're through about three-quarters of the mass of the atmosphere. It's above 10,000 feet that really you need supplemental oxygen, or at least be able to take it easy, because the air molecules are so spread out up there that we don't, when we breathe, get the amount of oxygen we need.
Tom, I really think a lot of people fell asleep in class over the years. I mean, come on. I mean, I don't know how you can get this kind of information and go, well, that's not true. I guess that's just confirmation bias, but that is what it is. Before I have to get rid of you in a few minutes, I don't mean get rid of, but let you go. You know how it works in this business.
Yeah.
I was so excited about your AI piece on GN about argon.
Oh, my gosh. That's the Aurora exascale computer that's gone in there. It's taken 7 years to build. It covers the equivalent of 2 NBA basketball courts. It's in a 10,000-square-foot facility, John. And that thing requires 44,000 gallons of recycled water to cool it off because it generates heat.
Right.
Now, this thing does, what do you get this? 2.5 billion mathematical operations per second. And that is impossible to get your hands around. But think of it this way. If you gave every human on Earth a computer and you told them, go to work, start computing, presuming they knew how to run the computer, at the end of 4 years, every human on Earth armed with a computer would do the number of calculations in 4 years' time that computer at Argonne in Lamont does in 1 second. And what will be done with that machine is they're going to model the brain, the human brain, for the first time. They're going to look at the way cancer and other diseases spread through our body. They're going to look for new materials that will produce better batteries and hopefully get us away from some of these rare earth materials that we require and extend the range of batteries. They're going to look for new medicines. The fact that we came up with a COVID vaccine as fast as we did, something like 10 months, used to take a decade to develop a vaccine like that. They used the Oak Ridge National Laboratory supercomputer, which isn't even as fast as the one up here in Argonne. And there's a new breed of computer weather and climate forecast model, these AI or artificial intelligence models, which is showing great promise in forecasting with accuracy in an entirely different way. Right now we use Newtonian physics in our computer models to show how the atmosphere is going, where a storm's going to develop, how it's going to move. The computer learns by looking back at 50 years of data and then starts looking at numerical correlations between the development of the atmosphere moving forward in time. And it's coming up with a 12-day forecast in 3 minutes, which is showing skill scores that are about equivalent to the Newtonian physics models we use that take hours on the world's fastest computers. And with the time we save by using this new sort of AI model, the hope is that we'll be able to run whole ensembles. We run about 30 to 50 versions of our current computer models and average across them. And the way we come up with the different runs is we take the 6.3 billion weather observations that go into our computer models, and we reinterpret them slightly differently because we don't perfectly measure the atmosphere. And by slightly reinterpreting all this data and then feeding it into the models, we can adjust for inaccuracies in the way we've initially measured the atmosphere. And it turns out studies have shown if you run multiple forecasts like that, average them together, the accuracy is far better than the prediction from one model. Well, with these new exascale type computers, the hope is we'll be able, instead of running 30 to 50 versions of the models, we'll run thousands of them and be able to do this in a realistic time frame and make this available to human meteorologists who will then produce better and more accurate forecasts.
Go ahead.
One of the hopes, John, is right now, to see a tornado, we have Doppler radars that look at the wind fields inside thunderstorms. The hope is that we'll get down to developing models that predict individual thunderstorms and then perhaps forecast an hour ahead of time which of those thunderstorms is going to go tornadic, and then be able to put out a tornado warning an hour or more ahead of time at some point down the road.
Saving lives.
11 minutes of time. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Two things pop into my head. Number one, I I'm not a big fan of AI because I've only seen the nefarious applications of, cloning people and all the rest of the stuff, what they're doing. And that's all you really hear about. So when I watched your entire segment on the Argonne thing, and I thought, there's hope. This is a good thing.
Yeah. It is. The thing is, I asked them about that. I said, remember that sci-fi movie back in the 70s that showed this government computer that was supposed to prevent nuclear war? And the thing became so smart, it took over and said, hey, you humans, we don't need you. That's a real risk, John. And the AI developers will tell you, for one thing, we hope the people programming these machines teach them to love humans, because these machines are going to become brighter than we are, able to process more information. But if you use it the way they do at Argonne, which is not to produce a sentient computer that thinks on its own, but instead attack scientific issues like how do we make a better medicine and how do we make a better battery, you keep it away from that sort of developmental process that will perhaps threaten us somewhere down the road. Mm-hmm. But we're going to have to watch it.
Yeah,
It'll have to be monitored, no question.
The great inventor Buckminster Fuller said, we're creating all the right technology for all the wrong reasons. But this is one time, I think, that, again, I'm watching this thinking this thing is, there may be hope in technology. I've never really thought it that way, Tommy. I just kind of poo-pooed all that. I think we got to save ourselves and we got to cut back here and change things here. But if this machine and others like it can give us the predictions we need to save ourselves from ourselves, I think it's a huge win.
Or how about to figure out how cancer is spreading through our bodies, how Alzheimer's is taking our minds away, how to make a battery that will produce a car that will recharge in the time it takes to put a tank of gas in, and therefore makes electric vehicles cheaper and also better and longer running. How about nuclear power without as much of this nuclear waste that we generate?
Right. Hey, Tom, can you stick for a second? I got to take one more little break. I know there's more to talk about here. Tom Skilling joining me on WCPT. And if you haven't figured out by this point, facts matter. Back after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, Chicago media personality, John St. Augustine.
Yeah, man, I'm here. Should have had Tom do the weather update. Tom, when I have these conversations with you, I always think about your early days. I think there was no way when you're doing television shows with a puppet that you could ever imagine, first of all, the career that you would have and this amazing technological advances, right?
Oh, my gosh. I tell the young people, we used to have, before COVID, we had an internship program. Unfortunately, it's been one of the victims of the COVID epidemic. They stopped the internship programs and they haven't restarted. But, I told these young people, I said, do you realize we are witnessing a revolution in this science? Louis Uccellini was head of the Weather Service, finishing his doctorate when I was up at the University of Wisconsin, which, by the way, is the birthplace of satellite meteorology in this country, up in Madison. But he used to say that, the numerical modeling, these computer models we work with, represent one of the top 10 achievements of science in the 20th century. The lives that have been saved, knowing where hurricanes are going, where flash floods are going to happen, what river level is going to be, where tornadoes are going to touch down, and all this kind of stuff, has been incredible. It's hard to quantify that. But, when I started, John, we had no operational satellite imagery. We had no computer models. We didn't have a buoy network. We didn't have mesonets. Those are automated observation stations. The satellite imagery we get hadn't even been perfected at that point. And all this has come into being. And we have a look at this planet that we've never had before. We really have a fighting chance of figuring out what tomorrow's weather is going to be. Is it perfect? No, but it's better than it's ever been.
Yeah. And how do you explain how do you explain, if possible, the popularity of things like the weather? I know people that sit and watch the Weather Channel all day.
Yeah.
And it's not even where they live. They're looking at weather. You put Jim Cantore out there in the middle of a hurricane and the ratings go up. What is this fascination we have, do you think, with the weather?
Well, think about it, John. We swim at the bottom of what amounts to a giant ocean of air. It presses on us to varying degrees as high and low pressures pass by. It affects our psychology, the way medicines work, whether we can go to work if we work outside, how we dress. I mean, the weather is always at some level on somebody's mind. Of all the elements we put on television, the one story, when you got a big weather story that's going to affect every viewer and every listener of every radio and television station in America, is the weather. And it really, it shouldn't be surprising. Heck, we as a species, friend, from the primordial oceans, we're 67% water.
Right.
If not more. So it really, when you think about it, is not really surprising. I was reading a book recently about humans' affinities toward huge bodies of water like the ocean.
Right.
They can measure with MRIs which part of our brain is lighting up with activity and responding to external stimuli. And they find out that, bodies of water like our Lake Michigan and the ocean light up portions of our brain the way these bodies of water smell, appear, their color, their feel. It's just
we're drawn to the water.
Intimate relationship. Yeah.
So can you stick around for a couple minutes?
Sure.
So what I thought we would do is open the phone lines, because this kind of takes me back to our GN days where people would call in and ask for the weather. But we're not going to do that. I was fascinated. We're in Illinois. People say, what's the weather in French Lick, Indiana? I'm like, it's right next door. Look for yourself. But they wanted to hear it from you. So if you've been a fan, and you should see the text messages and things that Lady B's putting up for me. This guy's the most accurate meteorologist who's ever lived. Wow. Way to go, Tom.
Wow.
So if you want to have a question about climate or weather, if you played along, we would do that. If you want to give a buzz, it's 773-763-9278. If you have a question, comment, query, or idea, no complaints. For Tom Skilling, 773-763-9278. I know one of your escapes is Hawaii. So I bet most of your brain lights up when you go there. And where does it light up, and how does it light up different when you go to the great state of Alaska?
Well, I went to Alaska first in 1980, and I'll tell you why. I've always believed as a weather forecaster, you've got to understand the terrain over which the weather has traveled to get to where we are, where we live, to understand why the weather forms the way it does. So I always, I heard about these Arctic latitude, short winter days, long summer days, and the way they heat up differently. And in Alaska, you've got maritime air coming off the Gulf of Alaska and the Pacific Ocean fighting with continental air, and these mammoth storms develop. I remember standing in front of the maps up at in college at the University of Wisconsin, one of my professors looking at this mammoth Gulf of Alaska storm, and he said, almost stream of consciousness, why do the best storms happen where I'm not around to watch them? And I thought, well, maybe I'm not as crazy as I thought it was, because it's not that we're a bunch of sadomasochists in meteorology. It's just that when nature puts together some extreme weather event, be it a tornado or a snowstorm or a cold wave or a heat wave, you kind of are interested in how nature's done that. And so I went up to Alaska with that in mind, and I kind of thought for a long time, John, I was going to retire up there eventually. But then I went to Hawaii, and another thing, I had that weight loss surgery.
Yes.
Hey,
folks, I just got 25 pounds. I know. I just got to say this. You and I had breakfast in December, and I thought, unbelievable how well you look, Tom.
Oh, John,
and you work at it.
Best thing. Yeah. Well, you know what? They went in there, and these gastric bypass, it's all done laparoscopically now. They don't cut you open. They go through 6 holes in your abdominal tract, and they tie, the procedure I had, they stapled the top of the stomach and divided the intestines. So you cut the storage area and the processing area, and the bottom line is you lose weight.
Right. I
was diabetic. I was morbidly obese. My father was in the same shape and had a massive stroke and spent a year in comatose. We weren't sure he'd ever come out, and he only survived 2 years beyond it. Never walked again, never ate normally. I was on the same track. So I figured I'm going to give it a shot. But I'll tell you what happened is a sidebar. Suddenly cold weather mattered to me because I didn't have all this padding. And so somehow Hawaii seemed a little, but Hawaii's fascinating. It's got like these microclimates driven by the terrain out there. Do you know the tallest mountain in the world is Mauna Kea, the volcano on the Big Island there. If you go from the bottom of the ocean to the top of that volcano, which is 13,800 feet above sea level, but it goes 10,000 feet down to the ocean, it's taller than Mount Everest, the tallest mountain in the world. So it's just fascinating to watch the weather and, of course, the ocean. I love the ocean, and I love the lake. I was walking along it yesterday and the day before in that beautiful 70-degree weather. So anyway, John, it all ties together in a strange and confusing way.
Absolutely. So let's go to the phones here before we jump off for a break in about 4 minutes. Mark's calling in from South Bend, Indiana. He's got a question about the weather. Mark, welcome to the show.
Hey, Mark.
Hi, welcome. Hey, Tom, it's an honor and a pleasure to get to talk. My reference is the Groundhog's Day blizzard of February 2nd, 3rd, 2011. There was that snow band that extended from Green Bay, Wisconsin, Louisville, Kentucky, of a minimum of 10 inches of snow in that band. Chicago, I believe, was hit with that day of 21 inches, blizzard wind, thunder, lightning. I took infrared photographs when they came later of the intensity of that storm. And a guy who used to fly in the Air Force refueling, he says, Mark, it looks like those cloud tops were exceeding 50,000 feet. And I want to verify with you, is that the biggest North American storm? And there was also tornadoes and hurricanes all the way down to the Gulf Coast with that frontal system. Is that the biggest cyclops in North American history?
John, I don't think so, but I'll tell you something. You are absolutely right. When you get a mature winter cyclone like that, which is what we call these big low pressures, the warm sector will produce tornadoes. The cold sector will produce what we saw up here, blizzards, thunder, snow, and all the rest. What happens in the atmosphere is when you get very cold and very warm air right next to each other, you get a strong jet stream between them. And interestingly enough, the jet streams are not of uniform speed. There are pockets of strong winds, and they help set up the vertical motions that suck the air up into big clouds and can make thunder and lightning even in environments that aren't warm and 90 degrees, when it's snowing. Mm-hmm. And we had it all in that storm, 70-mile-an-hour winds. There was a 2-day forecast lead time on that storm. It was perfectly forecast by our models. And that was an extraordinary storm. And I would say something else, John. The cloud tops in that one wouldn't have been to 50,000 feet, but your friend is right. I mean, that was a doozy of a storm. There's no two ways about it.
Tommy, I can't remember what was going on in 2011, and you know exactly what was going on in 2011. Anyway, we're going to jump over to Donna in Rogers Park. She's got a question on climate change. Donna, welcome to WCPT.
Gilly?
There you are, Donna. Hello.
Hi, Donna. How are you?
I'm fine. Tom, let me tell you something. I never got to talk to you before while you were still at WGN, but I have to tell you, when I started listening to you several years ago, in fact, you graduated, I think, from college, or your career started the year I graduated from college. Was it 1978? Was that it?
74. I started professionally in 74. So, yeah, about the same time, Donna. Yeah.
Well, what happened was I always liked the weather, but you turned me on to the real love of weather. And the truth be known, when I would be listening to weather, I'd have everybody shut up around me. Don't talk. Tom is talking right now. Be quiet. Because the reason I loved you so much, everybody, all they wanted was, what's the temperature tomorrow? How cold is it going to be? How hot? What I loved about you, you gave the history, the statistics, the science. I mean, when you say the packed isobars, I used to get thrilled. I loved everything about your. I mean, you are the man. When I would tell people about Tom Skilling.
Hey, Donna. Donna.
Yes.
Donna, keep it coming.
Yeah.
I tell you, Donna, if I ever feel bad, I'm got to get your phone number.
Listen,
to say something.
I had to say,
Donna,
Tom is like the Elvis Presley of meteorology, is he not?
Do you know, guys, what the funny thing is? When I started, I used to scare the living daylights out of these news consultants. They said, you're too technical. You talk about jet streams. Nobody knows. I thought, people aren't dumb. This isn't brain surgery.
Right,
I mean, when you look at a jet stream, you know where the weather is coming from, and it tells you a lot about where storms are going to develop. Donna, thank you. You made my day. Thank you so much. I had such fun, and I've always said I have the most loyal and fantastic listeners in the world. And there are some people who say, he goes on and on forever and ever and ever. But you know what? Ben Bradley, one of our reporters, used to do a bit about how he went down to the cafeteria when my show started to buy coffee or walked over to Starbucks, and I had time to get a coffee. But you know what? The people who, after a while, people said, well, maybe he's not as crazy as, some say he is. So thank you, Donna. That's really nice.
Hey, Tom, let's take a quick time out. We just got a couple more phone calls, and I'll cut you loose, my friend. The reason I did this is I wanted to prove it wasn't an illusion back when we were working together 10 years ago, and the phone lines would light up just like they are now, like a Christmas tree, for people to talk to you, and you got fans all over the place. I just want to make sure that you were in on that. We'll take a short time out, take care of the people that make this show possible. More after this on WCPT, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Filling in today for Joan, Chicago media personality, John St. Augustine.
Joan will be back tomorrow this time slot. Her guests are Eric Zorn, the great writer from the Picayune Sentinel, Clay Risen, author of Red Scare, Blacklist, McCarthyism, and the Making of Modern America, and Casey Harrison, the political correspondent at the Nevada Courier Newsroom. Live, local, and progressive weekdays from 2 to 5 p.m. Central on WCPT, Chicago's progressive talk for 20 years. You've been listening to the Tom Skilling Show for the last almost hour, so the phone lines are totally lit up. Tommy, this is like old times for us, isn't it?
It's awesome, John. I just love working with you. But we always had fun, and don't we have marvelous listeners? My God,
yeah.
It's just great.
It's amazing, amazing, amazing. So let's take these in order and see if we can knock these out before I got to cut you loose. So first up, Bernie is on the line. He's been waiting patiently for 11 minutes. Bernie, welcome to the show.
Bernie.
Yeah, I wanted to say what my. Yeah, how you doing? I just want to say what my experience was. I was an air traffic controller in the Navy, and I used to. Wow. There was a catwalk around the tower, and I used to crawl out there with a spray bottle. And the weathermen used to walk out of a door a couple floors down. I used to spray the water on them, and they just couldn't understand it was raining.
Oh my word! Hey,
typical Navy guy.
Did you ever? Yeah, isn't it funny? I'll tell you. My uncle was a dentist in the Navy many, many years ago. But did you ever use a sling psychrometer? That's that couple of thermometers that you sling through the air to get the humidity and all. Did you ever do that when you were in the Navy?
Well, I was an air traffic controller.
So you didn't have to do that.
You didn't.
No, I mean I worked in the tower.
You were in a tower, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Bernie, appreciate the call. I want to get the rest of these phone calls. I appreciate your time and your service, of course, and spraying the other guys.
That's awesome.
Hose them down a little bit. We're going to go to Steve in Des Plaines. Steve, welcome.
Hey, Tom, how you doing? Real quick,
good, Steve.
You're a Chicago icon. I met you many years ago. In God bless her heart, her memory, Allison Payne had a barbecue in the backyard down the street from, and you were helping her host a barbecue. I met you that night, and it was
one of the one of the sweetest people. And I'm telling you, I don't know what happened there, but I'll tell you that's a real tragedy. She was an amazing human being. It really was.
Yeah, it was sad. A young career and all that. But anyway. Okay, here's the question. Yeah. This question entails a lot of physics. Okay, here's the what. Now we on Earth we are in a closed mechanical system. It's rules is by mechanical laws. Taking that logic, why isn't the weather always the same all the time?
Because of the rotation of our planet and also differential heating. Think about it. We have mountains, we have plains, we have different colored vegetation. All of this heats up differently. And we have water. 70+% of the planet is covered by water, which is the great thermostat in our planet, that and water vapor. So it doesn't heat the same way. If you've got a patch of bare ground and you've got a grassy surface next to it, they're heating differently, and they heat the air above it differently. And so that starts setting the stage for the atmosphere warming differently, and then rotated the planet. There was a guy at the University of Chicago who developed some of the models that we use. He used to have a pan of water. He put on a turntable, and he put dry ice and a cake in the middle of it, little shallow collection of water in the pan, and then he heated the perimeter of this pan and turned on the turntable. And if you put drops of dye in the water there between this chunk of dry ice and the heated rim, you started getting wave patterns like the one we have in the atmosphere. And that's all the result of the fact that one part of that pan was heating of the water, and it was heating differently than another part. And then you add Coriolis, the force that results from the planet turning, and you get weather systems that spin. If the planet didn't spin, if we weren't rotating on the axis, the wind would always blow from the North Pole down to the equator, from the north all the time. It would blow from the North Pole down to the equator. It would rise as it's heated down there, and then in the upper air return to the North Pole, where it would sink again and start blowing in from the south. But because we turn on our axis, this spins up all these weather systems we see, and that's why we have, such a variation. And then the planet is not the same colored surface, same elevation. Every little part of our planet heats differently than somewhere else, and that sets up the differential heating that sets our weather systems in motion.
I should have used that little turntable thing in my science fair project. I think I'd have got an A on that.
You would have.
That would have got an A on that. Let's get to some other calls. We're going to try and finish this up. There's a couple more online. We're going to go to Earl in Hyde Park, talking about jet stream and climate change. Earl, welcome.
Hey, guys, thank you very much. And, Tom, I want to give you a quick little story. I used to talk about weather with all my workers and family, and they would all ask me, when the hell did I get my degree in meteorology? It was all because I was listening to you. So I want to thank you for that.
Well, thank you, Steve. That's very nice.
And my question for you is, really, I'm going to put it in line with what you just got through talking about from north to south and everything. What do you think is going to happen to the atmosphere when all of the ice melts on the North Pole, and what effect is going to have on our weather patterns, or if we're going to have a weather pattern? Because I've heard that some people speculate that it's going to affect the ocean currents too. So I just want you to reflect on that, and I'll hang up.
Boy, that's a great question. Look, it's already doing that. The ice that's melting in Greenland is flooding the North Atlantic with fresh water. Fresh water is less dense than salt water, and salt water is, the water through which the Gulf Stream is running from Florida all the way up to Europe and bringing warm air from the tropics up to the north latitudes up in the Scandinavia and the British Isles and all the rest. And there are signs that the Gulf Stream, one of these ocean currents you mentioned, is running the slowest it has at any point in the last 1,000 years. And there's going to be further change. There'll be a host of changes. If we start melting all of the ice in the Arctic, and we'll probably do it during the summer. Then in the winter, it'll get cooler, and there'll be some ice redeveloping, but it won't develop the way it does now. That's going to change. Again, we get down to that fact that one area gets warmer than another on the planet, heats differently. You're going to change the way we heat this planet. That's going to alter jet streams and where storm tracks are and how precipitation lays out. So there are myriad changes, and some say, there are tipping points that we may go beyond, where we start developing a weather regime that's out of control if it gets bad enough. So mammoth changes, and that's what our climate models attempt to look at. What will happen if and when the ice melts up there?
Let's get to our let's get to our last caller here real quick. Thomas in Lincoln Park has a question. Thomas, welcome.
Well, thank you. First time caller. Boy, you're an icon, Tom. This is my question. When I was at Ogden, you're welcome. When I was at Ogden School and elementary kids many, many decades ago, the teacher made us every day look at the weather map on page 12 or whatever it was, 30, I don't know. And so we cut it up, we brought it in, it was good. And this is what she emphasized, and she was smart. She said, always look at the barometric pressure. Look at those bars, those lines across the Midwest, the ISO bars. That's going to tell you when the weather's going to change, and it's very important. You don't know anything unless you look at the ISO bars. You know what? I don't see those at all anymore. Why is that, Tom?
I don't know. You know what? it scares the devil out of these news consultants. When I used to put isobars on the map, they said, that just clutters up the map. And I said, yeah, a lot of people, they're still going to watch the weather if you put isobars up there. But for those who know what to make of the isobars, and what they tell us is how the winds are blowing. Nobody has to put into words what these, when they're packed, the pressure gradient's tight, the winds are going to blow. It tells you, anybody who knows the first thing about isobars and meteorology will look at that and get yet another level of information from the graphic they're seeing. I don't know why they don't show it. When I was a little kid, I used to watch a lady by the name of Gloria Ocon on WPIX New York. I lived at the time out and she put isobars on her weather map. This is back in like the 1950s because we moved out here to the Midwest. My family did in the 1960s. And I love that. But you're absolutely right. The isobars tell you a world of things about the wind and all. And that's why we plot them.
Maybe we can bring those back at some point. Tommy, I cannot thank you enough for sticking for almost an hour